in recorded history, natural disaster had a big impact on human societies and stuff like that, and how small, like tiny changes in climate could massively disrupt human civilization and bring them all crashing down. And the case study they used was something called the Late Bronze Age collapse. Have you ever heard of the Late Bronze Age collapse? Yeah, it's when all these like powerful, influential civilizations at the kind of peak of human progress around 1000 BC all simultaneously came crashing down, and no one was quite sure why it was, but the best theory we have is that it's like a kind of combination of climate factors, which led to trade disruption, which led to societal unrest. And then all these empires, like the Hittite Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the palaces of Mycenae in Greece, the Egyptian New Kingdom, all within a 20 to 30, 40 year period, all came crashing down at the exact same time. And I remember being hooked by that. I was like, that's so crazy. Like, we don't even know why this happened, but it was like a half-degree change in climate. And so I remember starting to research how, bad climate had been during history and how bad it had been, like these big climatic episodes had been during prehistory. And I started thinking like, wow, if that had caused all these civilizations to collapse, just a tiny half-degree change in climate, which caused drought, which led to those civilizations collapsing, some of the stuff that had been happening during prehistory was so much worse than that. And that got me thinking, like, how do we know that sophisticated human culture hadn't flourished, 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, and collapsed due to climate change or a natural disaster, volcanoes, comet impacts, anything like that. And that's kind of what set me on the journey, that along with the, the discovery of the remains in Morocco. And that really got me thinking about the story we've told regarding our past and how I wasn't quite sure. And yeah, that's kind of what made me initially kind of break away from the traditional timeline that we were being taught.
The term prehistory is weird, isn't it? Because it's like, according to what we find?
Yeah.
How do we know what historical, if there was a great cataclysm, like if the Younger Dryas impact theory is correct, how much history would be written down? What would be left? How would you find it? What would you know?
Yeah.
We're that's one of the things that disturbs me the most is the arrogance that some academics have to having a definitive understanding of the exact timeline of agriculture, civilization, and then modern humans.
Yeah, it annoys me. I feel like academics, as opposed to the alternative historians, are kind of more saying, we don't know, but here's a potential hypothetical scenario that could be possible. Whereas I feel like more mainstream, for want of a better word, I don't really like using that because I don't think there's such thing as a mainstream. It's not like there's a group of people that all collectively decide, but some particularly vocal mainstream kind of historians and scientists seem to claim to know absolute truth about the past, and that's just stupid. Like, how can anyone know about what happened 100,000 years ago or 200,000 years ago? And it kind of gets me a little bit riled up because at the end of the day, none of us know what happened back then. So I think a lot more possibilities are, possible than what many people appreciate. And yeah.
Did you ever see, there was a video documentary back in the day, something about the mysteries of the Sphinx, and there was this archaeologist that was mocking Graham Hancock's ideas and Dr. Robert Schoch's ideas about the timeline, saying, talking about things that existed pre-10,000 years. And he was saying, he was like laughing.
Yeah.
What evidence is there of any civilization from 10,000 years ago? This was literally, I think, around the same time that they discovered Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
Like this guy was mocking it. I think slightly thereafter they discovered Göbekli Tepe, which threw everything into a tizzy because now you've got something that was absolutely covered, they believe intentionally, somewhere in the neighborhood of 11,000 years ago.
Yeah, I think Göbekli Tepe is the biggest kind of smoking gun for at least for the idea that civilization is older and more complex than the traditional model suggests, because obviously, as you say, it's like 12,000 years old and it's massive megalithic pillars. I mean, you know about Göbekli Tepe. Probably most people listening to this will know about Göbekli Tepe, but it's such a clear sign that sophisticated human culture was present way earlier than the conventional timeline suggests. And I think that at least should throw a monkey wrench into a lot of these people's ideas regarding human civilization and when it began, because clearly the toolkit for civilization existed 12,000 years ago. So why couldn't it have existed a little bit earlier than that? And why, if it existed then, did it then take another 6,000 years for it to emerge in ancient Sumer, which is the kind of traditional thought to be the earliest civilization? So Göbekli Tepe is fascinating. I love it. It's a really interesting site. I think it will one day be classed as civilization. I'm almost certain that when enough time passes, we'll kind of look at that. And because it's a whole culture, the whole Tashtapela culture, there's like 14 sites at least. And they all have this kind of megalithic architecture. They all have shared symbolism. They all are clearly connected. Like, it's crazy how it's not defined as anything other than hunter-gatherers. And even if you think that hunter-gatherers built Göbekli Tepe, then you need to massively update the definition of what a hunter-gatherer is, because clearly they had surplus. They weren't just building these sites in their spare time. And yeah, it's a truly paradigm-shifting site. But I mean, everyone kind of knows about Göbekli Tepe now.
But not everyone. But also, as spectacular as what they've discovered so far is, they have only unearthed 5% of it, which is even more bizarre.
Yeah.
Because you've got so much stuff that's underground, you have no idea what's on those pillars. You know, there's speculation that one of the pillars from Göbekli Tepe that is unearthed is some sort of a calendar of events. And they believe that it depicts some sort of a disaster. Like that these, how they're making these images to be associated with either an impact or something, but there's a timeline that's inscribed in these pillars.
Yeah, there's like a study that was written or a paper that was written, and they think it's the pillar 43, I think it is kind of like a cosmic calendar, and it's like almost a prediction model of an impact that could happen or already has happened, and it's like a warning for the future. That is still disputed, but there's been good research that's done into that suggests that's what it is, and it's certainly a site that has cosmic alignments and kind of has been built with the stars in mind, which is something that we can say about so many ancient sites around the world, which is another thing that isn't really considered by, quote unquote mainstream archaeology, perhaps as much as it should be. So yeah, it's a fascinating site, and I really think it displays a lot about how human ingenuity and civilization. People get a bit stuck with the word civilization because we have a very narrow definition of what civilization is, and it's basically based on the old model of Mesopotamia, which is ancient Sumer. And because that was the earliest known civilization for so long, we kind of constructed this whole idea about what a civilization is purely based on Mesopotamia. But I don't see why that has to be what civilization is, because that was just one civilization, and just because that was the earliest one we'd found for a long time and still is thought of as such, doesn't mean that that's the only way that humanity can flourish.